Okay, so what are the pieces you've got to fill out here? What's left?
Why don't I flip the fantasy football manager to you now? Because I listen to you on the shows, and you've got a great opinion. What would you do, change, or if you're GM? Done.
We're here at Spruce Meadows with the head coach and general manager of Cavalry FC, Tommy Wheeldon Jr. My name is Ryan Pinder. We're outside Atco Field, and well, here we are waiting again. It's the 2020, the waiting game. Yeah, but the good news is you've got some of your players that are out and playing. Maybe give us the process of decision making when you're weighing a player. You know, let's do some Zoom workouts. We'll do some team building, whatever the case may be. Versus, okay, I'm going to give you to another organization. Play.
Yeah. So, what helps with Jose Escalante? He's in his native country. He missed out on the Island Games, so we're able to get him in a short-term deal with Vida in Honduras, who are vying for the top spot with Olympia and Marathon. He's playing well, you know, so we get video reports, so we get to see that. I think that's important because otherwise he'd have missed all these games since 2019. And then you look at your Richard Lucas, your new signings that are still training or playing. It helps with the marketability. So the international market, if they're playing, that means they come in a little sharper than the ones that have finished a shorter season here. And then you got players like Simo, that's, you know, with Offseason in Sweden, and you got other players that we're looking at in the new year to get, you know, all things COVID permitting, you know, to travel over and get into a safe training environment to sharpen them before pre-season hits, because we do have to bridge that gap. 500 and something days between there and there, and only 10 games in between is a long time, so we have to find creative ways to bridge the gap.
Yeah. So obviously Escalante, Honduras, that makes sense. That's where he's from. He's played for them, you know, and obviously I believe you mentioned Luca's significant others from Mexico, so he's training there. Tell me about Simmons to Sweden. How'd that come to be?
So yeah, it was a connection via his agent, to be fair, and he'd approached me because I'd put it out there and I said, listen, because of the shortage of the season, the players that are under contract, we want to open the doors for opportunity. Last year we sent, you know, Zator and Nico Pascuati to Ross County in Scotland and to Real Mallorca in Spain to kind of bridge the gap between that and pre-season. So when they approached us about Ostersons, we're like, this is perfect because they actually suit the way Simo plays. Very technical midfielder. They're a passing side. And again, it's great for him to go out there because you never know. We've also got to know our place in the food chain, that should he catch their eye there, play well again for us, it's potentially a sellable asset. So we've got to look at that in a way of a new league, of you know, using these opportunities to market our players.
I imagine that's probably only great exposure for the league if you have an impactful player in an established league and they're like, oh, CPL.
Yeah, it is. So I think it's... And the good thing about Simo is he's got his Canadian passport, but as well he's got his EU passport too. So it creates door openings, that does.
Okay, so what are the pieces you've got to fill out here? We've talked about retaining your core pieces. You talked about the, quote, spine. We've talked about some of the younger players, new faces, new signings. What's left?
Why don't I flip the fantasy football manager to you now? Because I listen to you on the shows, and you've got a great opinion, and I'd be interested. So if you said about our opinion, you've seen our team now, you obviously covered our team, you've seen what we've done, what we're missing. What would you do, change, or if you're GM?
Well,
done.
I'm not the guy to ask on tactics for this sport, but I talk to you enough to feel like I've got a good sense of where you're at. And one of the things you always talk about is, you know, you can have great structure and great culture, but the players that can single-handedly change games are the players that are famous in this sport. And I'm kind of not saying you said that, but in that spirit, like there's a reason when we talk about the greats, most of them are, you know, guys that put the ball in the net at a time. And there's that game-breaking talent. And you'd said earlier, magic when it matters. So I just think of impactful game breakers, but maybe I'm off.
Yeah, no, that's exactly on the Christmas list. It's
okay.
Yeah, you're right, and I think we have them, and I think we've had them. You look at Sergio Camargo. For us, he is that player, and I think he has the ilk that, you know, Tristan Borges had for Forge last year, Marco Bustos this year, and unfortunately, because of the volume of games we played in 2019, Sergio scored against Montreal in the Canadian Championship run. Pulled up, we probably brought him back a bit too early, so he's never fit for the finals, and a game like that can change a game. we're fortunate now we've got him on a good plan, because the back-to-back games, the Island Games, isn't favourable for a player like that, because injuries have gone up 200%. So that works, but we can't just rely on him. We've got to look at a Richard Luca, perhaps. We've got to look at the centre forwards that we're bringing in, that we think can do it. And then I think we'll get one more. I think we're in the market for another, what we would call a game changer.
Okay. Yeah, and they're the ones that people want the names on the jerseys. They're chanting their names. And you've done a really good job, I thought, in the first 2 years here of finding those guys. Like, I remember watching the first time Escalante on the left, and you're like, this guy's breaking people's ankles. This is unbelievable. He can beat a man one-on-one. I'm not the big football purist and don't have a long history of the sport, but the people around me say, skin him, Escalante! Like, oh, geez, okay, that means he's good. All right.
Well, and you also look at, we had players that become cult heroes here, like, and I'd say Dominic Zator's one. He scored some big goals. Our first ever win against
in the snow.
Yeah, in the snow. And again, as a Calgary lad that came through Calgary Foothills and UFC, he embedded himself in the Calgary soccer community with doing that. And again, scoring the goal against Whitecaps was huge. He become that, but he's not the scorer of goals. Right. But he ended up scoring our first goal at the Island Games, so he scores significant goals. Nico Pascuati is another one that unfortunately he's injured, and we'll wait for his return. But we've got to make sure that we add to those type of players with players that can create something out of nothing, because that's why Messi's and Ronaldo's, and look, we're talking about a salary cap league that isn't as big as, say, what an MLS would be, not the same as what a Bayern Munich could spend, but there's players out there that have a difference, and we've got to find them, and we've got to make sure we give them the right opportunity to be magic when it matters.
Tell us about Escalante. If there's been one silver lining, there's probably not many to 2020. He hasn't missed a lot of games with his injury.
Yeah, no, he hasn't, because he's now probably the 10 games we played, he's close to that in Honduras now, and he may go on to playing more, and their season ends around March, around the same time our pre-season would be. So it's actually perfect timing. I say he's playing well, and he's a difference maker. We miss not having him and Richard Luca this year. We changed our formation because we didn't have two wingers come in, and then Jair Cordova and Jose Hernandez get injured just before we leave. Then Sergio Camargo. Now we've got 5 attacking pieces that aren't available, and then we end up losing Oliver Minitel and Nico Pascuati. Suddenly it's like that. Our attack was put down to Mo Fazi as a wing back, Nathan Mavilla as a wing back, and then you look at your twin strikers of Jordan Brown and Mark Saber. So it did change the way we play. No excuses, but it does give context to what we're looking for in the new year.
What's the latest from Nico? How's he doing? And do you have a timeline for him? Because we know how intense he is. He's going to try to shatter any timetable you give him.
Well, you always say the safe zone that the doctors talk about is this 9-month window that is the chance of re-injuring significantly goes down. So we put it to him. You know what Nico's like. He's already thinking 6 months and he'll be ready. But we'll take it in due course. He's an important member of our squad. He's put his body on the line for us. He's been a great part of the story. And as a local lad from south of here in Lethbridge, he's a great story. So we're hopeful that we see him back on the pitch here at Atco Field.
That'd be great. Okay, final moments here. Let's get some words of wisdom, which I always enjoy. We love chatting with you on the program where I work, because there's always a takeaway that you feel like you can apply to your life. You don't have to be a footballer. There's always some good advice, some sage advice in there, or a quote that sticks with you. So what's the best piece of advice you ever received as a player?
I think it was from an old youth coach called John Trollope. He played for Swindon Town. He was our old youth coach, and he talked about play the game with enthusiasm and desire. And I remember he said it to me in front of my dad. My dad would then remind me about it, enthusiasm and desire. And now as a coach, I see it like there's players, and I've just mentioned, Nico Pascuati, and you see Dominic Zator, and they leave it out there. Nick Ledgerwood, he's played 50 times for the national team. You can see what it means to him to play. And when we've seen that in Joe DiChiara, we're like, that's the type of player you want to be. So any young player now, my son, he's 11 and he's still learning the game. But one thing, whether he's the most skillful or not, whether he's the most athletic or not, he'll leave the pitch and people know he's played because he just shows that. He's just got that enthusiasm and desire.
Best advice you ever got as a coach, or have so far?
That's a good one. I think for me, I remember going to Liverpool's academy to learn, and a guy called Steve Highway was a legend there, and there was a quote that said, a 2-minute conversation with a player in a hallway will outdo a 2-week training stint. And I think that's so important, because that speaks to the human values. Something that I hold true with how I connect with players is, get to know the person, get to know the player, get to know the issues they may have around them, and you'll get a better player on the pitch.
You mentioned your son. Best advice as a teacher.
Oh,
we have to expand our roles in 2020. You're a parent. You're now a teacher. How's your math? You have any sage advice or needed advice?
My wife and I divide and conquer. She takes care of the schooling and the online, and she's far better than I am with that. And I take care of the sport and the athletic side. And the
You're the phys ed teacher.
I'm the phys ed teacher. There you go. Done.
And a good leader delegates. There's your advice right there. Any words you've tried to live by? Maybe bigger picture than football, if it has to be.
I think the pursuit of excellence. Actually, you always want to try and, because you're always trying to get better than you were before, and you're always moving forward. And I think I've shown that in even my soccer career here, from the youth stages through to the pro-am stages through to the professional stages, and just now it's there. Now can we go even higher? Now can we get into the Champions League? You know, they're the things that you're always aspiring towards. We're always trying to make things better here. There's Mr. Southern always talked about what excellence means. So I think that's something that's a value, not just for me, but for around here. But I think for me I think it's just being the best version of yourself all the time. I remember having this conversation with Terry Dunfield, actually, and we were talking on our A-licensed coaching course about, I said, I'm going to get deep with you here, Terry. I said, what do you want your epitaph to say? And he looked at me. I said, because, well, I said, we're all going to leave this earth. I said, what do you want it to say? I said, because that's who you are as a person, as a leader. And he said, well, why? What would you have? And I said, well, he made a difference. And I think that's all we can ever try to do is, well, no matter what field we're in, make a difference.
What's 2020 taught you, or any advice that it's given you?
It's taught you, I think, how to be resilient. I think things that you thought you had just for the sake of it, you learn to appreciate. You learn to appreciate the small victories, like time with family. You appreciate the things you need versus the things you want. And I think you learn to be versatile. We use that saying around here, adapt and overcome. We had a tough year with, COVID, with not having things, but there's people having tougher years. There's people losing lives out there, and I think we've got to appreciate what we have. We're still connected, we're still living and breathing, and we still have an opportunity to be back. So.
It's well said. That's probably a good note to close on. We'll do one more. Be sure to look for it. It's Tommy Wheeldon Jr., the head coach and GM of Cavalry FC, as we continue our off-season chats.